Okay, so in this video I want to talk about the new hero in For Honor that will come out some in January, uh, and my speculation here is that what kind of weapon the new pirate wulin character will have is a Jin sword, and a Jin sword is a straight blade aimed for cutting, thrusting. Yeah, and this is the two things they are good for. And specifically, if you think about it, if you are on a ship and most of the opponents you meet around 17 or 19th century, 1900, will not have armor, will not have any like chainmail, plate armor, lemonade armor. Most of the time, just normal clothing because of pistols, because there's some of the pirates and some of the non-pirates will have sea people will have pistols, and most guns at that time will just go right through normal armor if you don't have a very specific armor that is extremely expensive and very rare to find. And the most time when we see this kind of bullet like pistol proofed armor, most of the time they are belonged for kings or very specific generals that is very important, that that have to stay so long safe as possible because they are very important to the mission and so on. Um, yeah, but the main thing here is that why I think this female character will have a Jean sword is because Jean sword is a very famous sword in movie and in China, because it's most like, for example, all like the kung fu movies, when they fight they use a Jin sword because it's a very flexible weapon, very like yeah, kung fu-ish weapon, and they also give a very like a gentle touch to a character's ability to kill, if I can say like that. It's a very un looking brutal weapon. It's not a weapon that you think of, for example, as a mace or a warhammer or a hillabard or a dagger axe or a guandao, or a katar or any other kind of weapons that looks very intimidated. The Jin sword is much more sorry, much more gentle sword. It's a deadly sword, absolutely very dangerous weapon, but it's not a weapon. It's more in the more like for specifically for like kung fu movie sword. You can say the Jin sword, and it's more like a gentleman sword for gentleman sword, and that is the only sword we don't have yet in For Honor for the Wulin faction. And if the new character, the new pirate, will be a assassin or a, like for example, a light character, then the Jin sword will be a very good weapon for that character. And you can also see that it's the contour of the weapon of the shadows when you see the character coming from the ship, and you can see the sword is a very like the handle, the the hilt is very much shaped as a like a Jin hilt, yeah, Jin sword. And you know how a Jin sword is the most common sword in China to see in movies. Almost every movie you see the hidden crows and tiger, hidden dragon. You see a Jin sword that have a jade blade of jade, green jade, and you can see it in you find it in almost in Soul Calibur, the video game Soul Calibur. One of the character will have a Jin sword, It's many kung fu movies. You're gonna see Jin sword. It's you cannot miss it. If you have ever seen any kung fu movie, you will one in one scene you're gonna see a Jin sword. It's a extremely common sword, and you also see um, the Jin sword in practice of like Tai Chi. Tai Chi practice, you see the Jin sword. So this is a very common sword, and it's a sword that goes back all the way to like the Qing dynasty, the first emperor of China, and then all the way to Han dynasty, and so on and so on and so on. And later on, obviously, they change from the straight blade, a straight sword, like with a tip, to more like the precursor of the katana, that the Tang dynasty. And obviously, then you have the Dao sword, and obviously you have a long sword, you have the Guan Dao, but obviously with different shape and all of this kind of thing. And obviously, with all of this, is that is the only thing maybe that's gonna be strange with maybe with the Jin sword, if you're thinking historically, with a pirate character from China. Obviously, maybe more likely a Chinese pirate will have a some type of a Dao sword, a Miao Dao, than a Jin sword. But because because in For Honor they already have a character in the Wulin faction that use Dao sword, so they cannot have two characters with the Dao sword. So even if, for example, that is also other thing that with swords is that the only character with the only sword we don't have yet for the Wulin is a Jin sword. So I absolutely think so. Yeah, I think the new character we're gonna have a Jin sword. Do I want it? No, I much more want to have the new character to have a mace weapon or axe or a war club from like this kind of thing. But obviously because of popularity, and obviously because it's a weapon that, yeah, extremely common and extremely popular in kung fu movies. And the wulin obviously is a inspiration from a kung fu background, from like the Romance of the Three Kingdom, inspiration from Monkey King, and obviously all of them have something to do with martial art. So obviously, if you put a character there that is a pirate, it's not. For Honor have nothing to do with history. You have a pirate, and that pirate is from inspiration from a famous female Chinese pirate from the 18th or 19th century, and you give her a Jin sword, a straight blade, straight sword, and you make her a assassin type of a character, like a fast character. Then you're gonna have, for example, a Chinese, a Wulin version of the Yamato, of the Orochi in of the Japanese faction in For Honor. So the obviously, so yeah, and it can absolutely be possible with the Jin sword that they put a basket on it, because we know from the Han Dynasty, when they trained, they straight blade, they have a hand protection on the blade that protect their front hand, and that we see when they train in the training, but we don't see that hand protection uh, when they go to war. And obviously, even when the Dao come in, even the Ultra Dao type, the saber sword, some of the officers still have the Jin, some type of a Jin sword with them. But most likely they have two types of sword. For example, the Dao and the Jin sword. And the Dao sword was more for giving damage to people with armor, And that is also, I think, is other thing. What I think is important to understand here is that just because you cannot cut through somebody with your bladed weapon, do not mean that the weapon cannot be used in war against armor. Because if the weapon have a heavy, and you can give the same type of effect as a axe, but you have more reach because there's more blade on it than an axe, or a mace. You can you can use it in the same way as an axe because of the impact of the hit, and that is more important. Is as long as the weapon is give a real heavy hit to the body, you can do extremely much damage. Um, so this is why I think for example, why Jin sword was still used in the final era of Chinese imperial dynasty, before the uh, invasion of Japan and so on. They still use the Dao sword, is because it's a very effective weapon, and the Jin sword at that same time was a weapon for more like for duels, like for example like in France when they fight with the rapiers. The Jin and the rapier are very similar, even if they have different shape, but they belong to the same aristocracy with nobility, you can say. For example, in France, the noble people in France and the noble people in China, they probably gonna use a Jin or a rapier in duels because it's a much more easier weapon, to do if I even can say it, to kill in a less graphic way. I think the rape. If you compare, for example, obviously the rapier is a very, very, very dangerous sword, but they don't gonna give a same graphic design, graphic effect as you, for example, have a warhammer, or you have a Iqua, a solo spear. You're gonna do a much more like it's much more. It's death, but it's not death in a very graphic way. Um, so yeah, and obviously there is because then you obviously call the Jin sword a gentleman's sword, because I think it's much more gentle fighting, but it's still a death fighting with this weapon. And there is a why I think the character, the pirate, will have a Jin sword. But the reason why I think the pirate will have a Jin sword is because it's very easy to use on a ship. It's not heavy, it's light, it's sharp, and it's have a sharp point on the blade, and you give a thrust, and the enemy or you have no armor. That is perfect. You don't have to have a heavy weapon if you fight people without armor and just normal sea clothes. They're out in the sea. Um, and then obviously it's much better than to have a quick sword if nobody gonna use any shield, or just yeah, much better with a quick weapon. Yeah, so this is just what I think. So that I think that she gonna use a Jin sword, and she gonna be some type of assassin character, assassin type. Yeah, and I think with all of this, the weapon, the Jin sword for the female pirate for the wulin faction, is gonna be a very interesting combination with that character's ability. How Because we don't see so much in For Honor people with trusting ability. Most, like we see, one of them is the the character we have now from Wulin, and the guy with the Chinese longsword, late version, like the